Welcome to Practical Psychology Podcast, episode number 4. I'm Joseph Wong.
I'm Alison Koo.
And I am Tara Steinberg. Today, our guest on the podcast is Alfred Yau. He came to therapy a little later in life after spending 2 decades in the corporate world as an actuary and in HR. He has a lot of experience working with men, including 5 years of work with a men's group. And he wants you to know that he's an athletic nerd and a financial fox. Welcome, Alfred.
Thank you, Tara, and hi everybody.
Hello, Alfred. We are very interested about men's group and therapy because your private practice specializes in men. Tell us more about it.
Sure. Yeah. When before I started my therapy journey, I had made this decision, and I wanted to focus on men that don't believe in therapy. So it's a tall order to fill, for a lot of reasons, but there's a large need for it. I would say that stigma has decreased over time. There's studies that share this, from generation to generation. Stigma is not as a big of an issue compared to, say, from baby boomers to Gen Z. But there's still some remaining aspects about when it comes to men in particular, that the stigma often still remains. So even though stigma has gone lower, mental health problems haven't gone away. The issues have stayed about the same, perhaps even gotten worse for other reasons. So, um, focusing on men is just an opportunity to address a really unfocused and unaddressed aspect of mental health in the community.
This is big here, Alfred, because for mental health performance, it is a big topic for everybody here. And can you tell us a little bit about because you talk to hundreds, thousands of men, what is the typical stigma of believing in mental health or seeking help for men?
Yeah, Joseph, that's a good question. So one of the biggest aspects of stigma is about personal identities towards men and how it revolves around mental health. So there's certain identities as a man that, for example, these are some somewhat stereotypes, but some still hold true in that there are some personal beliefs that often revolve around being a strong leader and being stoic, emotionally strong, maybe resilient, but more so it happens that it's somewhat disconnected in some ways. That's what I think is created. So that's a one of the biggest issues when it comes to working with men in mental health, in that a lot of the traditional, say, Western ideas when it comes to mental health, when it comes to, openness and vulnerability, that could be in direct conflict with a man's identity in some cases. So that's one of the big things.
Wow.
Mm.
So, Alfred, what are some of the approaches that you like to use, given the sort of differences that you've observed?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question, Allison. So one of the biggest things when it comes to a therapeutic approach in general is that there's a lot of studies out there that suggest that men need time to warm up before they can open up and share their story. So, if you think about a traditional person-centered approach, just paying attention to the individual unique client's needs. And so for men, that could mean slowing down. Like even at the first session, the the time could be spent on the whole session could be just about what is counseling, what are the expectations. So for someone that's been in therapy for a long time, you wouldn't need to spend so much time doing that. However, you could often, it's pretty common to see a male client and that having being their very first foray into therapeutic practice. So spending a lot of time there can really help, create comfort and just that safety, that container that facilitates the possibility of that client opening up. So it starts from the very beginning. Just just notice that things could take more time because it's newer. It's a muscle that hasn't been flexed yet. But over time, just sticking with that, it gets easier and easier.
I love that you're meeting them where they're at just from day one. And I'm really curious, are there any like different things that you might do when, say, working with a client like this who's going to it for the first time? Like I remember hearing something about uh instead of staring directly at each other, sometimes it can be helpful to sort of sit and
Mhm.
maybe not be looking right at each other. I don't know if any of that resonates with the work that you've done.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a great tip and a toolkit to potentially draw upon when working with men, or just, some clients in general also could appreciate that. There is some aspect where the one-on-one conversations, these aren't typical when it comes to, boys growing up even. They're not just sitting down and they're just, having coffee or I don't know, Slurpee or whatever you would when you were younger, and just like staring each other face to face and having a chat. They might be riding their bike together. They might be doing all sorts of different things. It's all around activities. And often these activities don't involve face to face unless they're playing a sport or something like that. So, how does that translate into how I would work? For example, um, a practice that I'm part of has an option for walk and talk, walk and talk sessions. So instead of sitting in a traditional one-on-one therapy session, find a safe space and that's quiet, conducive to therapeutic conversations, and walking and having those conversations. So to, like you said, Allison, you're not facing face to face, and it actually allows men to be just more open because it's more familiar. And so I have a particular section where I will walk with the client, and it will lead to a really nice point near a body of water. And you see a bunch of these sailboats coming in and out, and it's really peaceful, calm, private. And so I've had a couple of clients where we just sit there and we just look out and just, look into the distance and see the boats. And they happen to be some of the most therapeutic, deep conversations I've ever had with those clients. I just feel like it's comfortable, and it's just something that just feels natural. And yeah, and it's compared to some of the other sessions that could have been, say, virtual or in the office. I wouldn't say that it was exactly attributed only to that, but it definitely made a difference. And yeah, they appreciate it. It's just kind of like men are used to having those conversations. Nowadays, as adults, it's like you're in the car and
Mhm.
you're a passenger and driver, and you're just staring forward, having a conversation. So, any way that it could make sense to do it in a therapeutic setting can also be helpful.
I love that you also are able to bring in kind of a bit of mindfulness with that strategy of sitting and looking out on the water. That sounds really, really appealing to be able to weave it in so naturally like that.
Yeah, that's so true, Tara. There's a traditional mindfulness meditation and act therapy, leaves on a stream.
Hmm.
Well, you can actually picture the leave on a stream when you're in those circumstances. So it's just a really nice environment for that.
A definite visual aid that would be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm also wondering, so with all this work with men and typically men that don't really come into therapy with misconceptions about what it is, what are some of the things that they're most surprised about when they sit down with you and start actually engaging in therapy?
Mm. Yeah, I'd say one of the first things that come to mind is it's not like what's on TV. So that could be one of the most common ways that men can experience therapy, what they see in media, and often it's
Hmm.
portrayed like really biased, and not truly representative of what therapy actually is like, save a couple of, well well thought out documentaries and good shows. But um, I've heard it a couple of times now that people are comparing the experience to The Sopranos, if you're all familiar with that show. And so yeah, and then usually I'll mention, yeah, that's it's probably not a good idea to sleep with your clients, and that's not what's going to happen here. Just as an example of what expectations not to have. Yeah, but yeah, they come in with almost like a blank slate. But
Hmm.
another aspect is like what's familiar to them. And with men, another familiarity aspect of it is advice. So I can often start the therapeutic process with asking the client what they think uh, therapy is. And oftentimes, some response during their answering the question talks about advice to help, for problems and all that. And um, then that part starts with an education and or a discussion about that, about, okay, so that's what you think. It's about advice, but let's just have a discussion and see if that makes sense from a therapeutic perspective. Also, does it make sense from your life perspective? You have you've been given or giving advice all your life, but you're coming to therapy with some sort of issue and it still hasn't been resolved. So, how's that going for you? That kind of thing. And so, usually having that conversation, then the client usually is more open to the idea of, okay, maybe it isn't absolutely appropriate to provide advice, and especially in a therapeutic setting.
Very interesting.
Mm,
Whenever you mention a very good point, I want to follow up a little bit more. You mentioned holding their space, be slow, and let them be present, which is very different from other people preconceptions that man comes, we have to problem solve very fast.
mm,
You actually want to slow down here. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you hold and create that space for the
mm.
client, for
Yeah,
men?
yeah. Joseph, that's a great point. Men often go into problem solving. This is another generalization slash stereotype. Someone comes through with a problem and then immediately they're jumping at it. Like, oh, look, I can provide help and I can provide service. Let me go do that and let's fix it for you. Um, so to slow down, there's a couple aspects to it. Um, so the first thing is to try to use language that is more conducive, at least to start off with, that is going to help them, I guess, just be open and understand the concept more. Because if that's the immediate reaction to start trying to fix the problem, well, um, something that I could perhaps introduce is the idea Einstein might be attributed to this quote or this idea, but he would say something like, "If I had an hour to address a problem, I would spend 55 minutes understanding what the problem is, and then 5 minutes to actually solve it." Pause there. And usually at that point, a client will think about that and say, "Yeah, okay." And then they'll probably think in their mind, "Yeah, there was a time where I jumped in too early and I was solving the wrong problem," which is usually one of the pitfalls of just trying to, without understanding what the true problem is. And um, yeah, solving the wrong problem, continuing the problem, not understanding what it is. So that's part of the process. Speak to the language. The slowing down part can be really difficult. But that's where traditional mindfulness can come into play too. And everybody's a bit different, men included, in terms of where their mindfulness journey is. Some are well practiced, um, and some just say, okay, I hate meditation. I don't really like to do it. So once again, it's just meeting where the client's at. And if we're talking about going back to the language used,
Mhm.
so you don't you don't have to talk about it in terms of like the traditional senses that we talk about, mindfulness, meditation. You can use it towards you know, stress management techniques, relaxation techniques or processes. And that way, uh, using like a language that they're more open to hearing, it helps facilitate the same type of interventions that you would end up doing anyways. But instead, you don't get that immediate resistance of, I've tried meditation, I can't do this. It doesn't work for me.
I have to admit, Alfred, that listening to you talk, I'm thinking about how I typically react to my male clients, and I do kind of feel the need to jump in and give a lot of tools. Am I doing that the wrong way?
Well, in a lot of ways, that's what they're expecting. They're like, hey, I have this tool belt and on my belt, on my hips, and I just want to add another hammer, another screwdriver. And I think that could be really effective. But then, you know, um, perhaps what that could mean is, they might have some rusty hammers or some broken screwdrivers, and you're giving them, like a hacksaw that,
Mhm.
something else needs attending to first.
So it sounds like the tools are okay, but we better make sure that we're giving them the right tool, that it is a nail that their problem. So before we give them the hammer.
Sure. And like there's probably multiple ways to address this. My personal approach is to take whatever clients, their strengths and whatever they're equipped with, and just hone those skills, and so that they're going to be familiar with them, they're going to have access to it, and just make sure that what they have can be put towards, whatever they're working for intentionally. And so adding new skills is going to be really good. And hopefully that gets added there. But it also could be pretty overwhelming if, they're trying to organize what's going on in their brain of like, okay, this is how the brain works, right? So it a lot of their skills and tools are in the long-term aspects of their brain and memory, so it's easy to access to. And it takes a lot of effort to learn new things. And at least early on in therapy, it's easier to align with whatever's in the long-term process of the brain and just add on those so that they can find immediate benefit from it and just have an increased chance of, continuing on because um, it no one really likes to go to therapy and just not having any progress. It's uh, well, at least I wouldn't. So I'm trying to give, and that's something that I try to do as best as I can for my clients without rushing too much. Try to get to the point as quick as possible to provide some sort of benefit, some beneficial outcome, so that they can see that there's value in the process, especially with men that might have a lot of preconceptions and negative connotations towards therapy.
And Alfred here, I want to follow up a little bit about what you said about the language that a lot of men use is
Mhm.
through activity.
Mm.
And I know that you work in downtown Toronto with a lot of corporate professionals. You mentioned about the activity of walk therapy. In the future, what other activities plus therapy that you're gonna branch out?
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's a good question. That's something I'll have to think about even in this moment. Um, Something that comes to mind is an article I read from the CBC, perhaps a year or two ago, and it was about someone integrating rock climbing into therapy. So having a therapy session while you're climbing rocks. Now, it was a more safer environment. indoor climbing, holding, the plastic holds instead of, going out to the crags in Niagara or something like that. But there's an interesting aspect to it,
Mm.
because, Joseph, as you said, activities. With men, the idea of incorporating activities into therapeutic practice, there's a lot of benefit to it. Just a lot of men, as opposed to having talk therapy being a primary process to dealing with mental health, a lot of men choose to use action towards trying to make themselves feel better. And, as an intervention, that's not a terrible thing. Just doing that perhaps might not be the best thing possible. But yeah, so doing something like rock climbing, I'm a rock climber myself, so I could see myself doing that as well.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and there's so many life lessons as it comes to rock climbing, like pushing past your fears, just noticing your thoughts while you're,
Mm.
um, 20 feet in the air and you don't know if you have the strength to do the next step. What do you do? The mental preparation, um, the practice and the training required. There's a lot of aspects of sport and activity that can be related to mental health too. So you basically can insert any sport like that
Mm.
and add it into therapeutic context, and there could be potential benefits. And lastly, there was another article I read for younger adults, say children or teenagers, that there can be pretty good therapeutic effects while introducing therapy and the use of video games. So, for someone that's not, let's say a kid might have trouble opening up to traditional talk therapy, just, open up, the new Switch came out recently, so play some Mario Kart with them for a little bit. And all of a sudden, then you can spark all sorts of different conversations. It's a great conversation starter, and it activates that part of the brain that that facilitates the act of doing something, whether or not you're thinking about it or actually doing it. They often can be the same thing. So if you're playing games and you're also, actually having these open conversations, then that mixture can also help make it more easier in the future without the use of video games as well.
Very
I love
interesting
the
here,
use
Alfred.
of using tech
Yeah.
in what you do. And I also, I mean, it sounds to me like what you're describing is adding some more experiential elements to the
Mm.
therapy, which can also sometimes really access a different part of the brain. So I find that fascinating as a strategy for sure. Do you use tech a lot in your, I know you say you come from this background with HR and finance. Is tech something you use fairly often?
I try to incorporate as much as possible. Joseph has taught me to use the Zoom whiteboard often, and I think it's a super great tool, as many of us can to attest to. So that's an aspect of tech. But just hang on a second, I'm off screen for 2 seconds. So I have a VR headset. This is an Oculus Quest 2.
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
And this is something that I haven't put in practice yet, but there are programs that you can download and um, and they are related to exposure therapy for someone,
Mm.
yeah, that, let's say they can't board planes or something like that, and there's some fear and anxiety towards that. So this is a good way to use technology, and there's a lot of studies that support the efficacy of using virtual exposure towards alleviating some of the stress and symptoms related to the fears or the issues they're dealing with. So I have yet to try it, but I'm very soon going to start the process. and it could be quite the interesting one. If anyone has ever tried the VR, it is quite immersive. Um, and yeah, so the technology is getting to the point, not quite there yet, where it could get to photorealism at some point in the near future. But for now, there's more than enough evidence that suggests even the current technology that exists today can be very, very beneficial.
I would
Mm.
imagine there are actually a lot of applications. I read a pilot study on dialectical behavioral therapy for a client that was very resistant to engage in the different mindfulness activities, a high-risk client, and they had a VR guided meditation, and all of a sudden the client was super engaged. It worked amazingly well. So I could see it being used in a lot of different ways. It's great that you're able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that I have tried actually, Tara. So, imagine, so this is not where I actually am right now, believe it or not. Uh,
What?
my place is a mess. But anyways, there's a couple of meditation apps that I have in this program. And so basically I could transport myself into that environment. So it's a very, very it's contrasting compared to my current environment. All I gotta do is just put this little headset on and I'm in the most peaceful place on earth. Or maybe in the
Amazing.
universe. Who knows?
Hmm.
Right. No limitations with VR.
Mm.
Oh yeah, and at this point here, I want to ask Alison, the expert in tech, what do you think?
I'm I'm soaking this in. I'm really appreciating this conversation. I haven't personally tried a VR headset in decades, so I don't think I have any like the last time that I experienced it was for a um it was for a study that was looking into the impact of how casinos are set up for gambling and what impact that uh has on someone who's going to it. So that was a very different application. It was more so like understanding and studying the impact of the environment. But I really appreciate this take on it where it's looking into um, using it in a therapeutic way and using it to, yeah, like that mindfulness example sounds amazing. I'm even wondering if you could go for a run on a treadmill and transport yourself into, a different location. If you happen to be like training for something where you're in a location where you can't run outside. I don't know. I'm actually, yeah, sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but I think this is really cool, and I love the conversation about experiential and integrating activity. And I think in in a situation now where we have uh, I'm finding a lot of clients are craving more in person, and there's a lot more demand for uh, yeah, more connection in that way. So I think this is really great.
Yeah, it's almost like a go-between almost between the virtual and the in-person world. There's still some ways to integrate some of the technological practices, but still be in person. So the people that crave that in-person experience can still benefit from some of the other technical aspects. Interesting thought about the treadmill and running in different places, Allison. I think that there's something promising there, but I would say probably put on one of those bubbles, like those soccer bubbles first, because that could be really disorienting. You're probably just gonna fall flat on your face at some point.
Maybe a stationary bike instead
Yeah,
then.
yeah, yeah. That sounds good. Hmm.
Alfred, so because a lot of the viewers might be asking, if you get one of those headsets, what other things you need to buy to work?
Right. Yeah. So the Meta Quest, I think it's at Oculus. Oculus is the old term for it, but it's called Meta. So Facebook or the Meta parent company bought bought that company. So anyways, there's a lot of headsets that work standalone, and this one is one of them. So you can
Mm.
just buy that and you can have access to all sorts of different apps, according to the Meta
Oh, do you
store.
need a phone to connect?
It does integrate with the phone as well. You can
Mm.
plug it into your PC to so there's it's hard to see this, but yeah. So this is a
Mm.
USB connector. So you can connect to a
Mm.
Mac or a PC or something like that, and you can leverage your device's
Mm.
processing power to have even like a more immersive VR experience. So the processing power of this thing is like a cell phone. And so think about
Oh.
what your cell phone can be capable of, and that's about its limitations, but plug it into a computer and it could be even better. Yeah, so you can plug it into your phone or it's connected wirelessly. You don't have to plug in at times. So you can do that. And yeah, it works with a lot of the different consoles, depending on what
Mm.
you buy too. Game
We'll
consoles, that
get
is.
one for the clinic for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You can get them really, really inexpensive secondhand. They're, like instead of going for coffee for a month, you can buy one of these things at this point.
Hmm.
Alfred, I want to follow up with the questions at the very beginning.
Hmm.
You talk about the man, the stoic, the strong persona, compared to the being open for therapy here. Can you
Hmm.
speak a little bit about how you help them, the stoic and strong persona?
Yeah. I'd say there's two aspects to the stoic and strong persona. One is how internally a man would feel, but also the second, which is the the environment and the world around that man and how that contributes to it. So the first is internal, which
Mm.
is I have to be strong, which means I am allowed to feel specific emotions. Like there's only a few emotions that men are allowed to typically in society. So you could be
Mm.
calm, you could be um, collected, you could be angry. That's okay. But some of the other things, like it's, gray area about being sad. There's certain things you're allowed to be sad about, like your dog dying. That's okay.
Mm.
But like you failed a test, maybe not so much. Maybe it's kind of be like, we've heard this term a lot, man up. You gotta man up and do blank.
Mm.
So, one of the first things is about psychoeducation, about emotions, right? So, practicing what emotions you felt and what those communicate. Anger communicates something. Anger can be it could be a secondary emotion to something else, some sort of unwanted attachment need or additional emotion, such as feeling unwanted, unloved, not good enough, those sorts of things. So it starts off with an education about what emotions can do, and then it's how to practice it, how to, find a safe space. So it could be their spouse, it could be like a close friend that, they can trust and they know that, they've met their whole lives, best friends, and try to practice what it's like to be vulnerable. Notice what those thoughts and emotions are like. So that's one aspect of it, what happens
Mm.
internally. But another aspect is on the other side. So let's say a man is in a relationship, in a heteronormative relationship. So
Mm.
it's, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. So there's also an expectation sometimes, whether it's known or unknown, from a partner that those ideas about a, strong stoic persona that has to be intact. So when those aren't intact, let's say a man opens up to their wife and says, "Hey, this is what I'm feeling right now. I'm not feeling very good. I'm not confident about my work. mm, et cetera, et cetera. And so if the man is lucky, they get support and validation and all sorts of different nice things when it comes to, proper emotional regulation. If they're unlucky, they get what's going on here? Like, you're my rock. I can't have you like this because if I'm like this and you're like this, how are we going to be able to survive? So that takes a lot of pressure on a man when they're expected to do something, they want to do something else, and it's not okay. And so that's going to be another aspect of it, just exploring that journey of how to get from that point, if that's the case, where it hasn't been safe, to the point where it can be safe.
Do you find yourself ever challenging the where the messaging came from and if it still applies to your client who's sitting in front of you?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question, Tara. Oftentimes that could lead to
Mhm.
some Socratic questioning that's related to some psychodynamic approach,
Mhm.
where often these relationships, these dynamics, and these approaches towards emotions can be learned from past, from our caregivers, from
Mhm.
their caregivers. It comes intergenerationally. So yeah, there's
Mhm.
a lot to be said about that for sure. Because oftentimes men don't have the opportunity or give themselves permission to have the opportunity to explore that, to understand where their behavior comes from. Or maybe it just becomes very superficial about, oh yeah, my dad's like this, so I'm like this too. And that's how it is. Let's move on. And so it could be like that, but that's also an opportunity to go a bit deeper. And therapy is great for that because that could, those sorts of statements can actually be acceptable, talking amongst other men, just, your friends nearby, and then that's it. You just get to that surface level. But when you're in therapy, then, I would start to explore that a bit more. Like, tell me more about that, about, those experiences that your dad, did you ever wonder, what led your dad to have those experiences? Is there any connection towards how have you seen that materialize into your life too? Simple questions like that, and then, who knows where it can take from there.
And Alfred, I know you support a lot of men from diverse cultures and backgrounds in Toronto, very diverse here.
Mm,
Can you tell us a little bit because you mentioned about the rock. In some culture, the man is the rock from the original culture outside of Canada.
mm, yeah, yeah, for sure. So, when it comes to Southeast Asian cultures, like where my background is also from, there's a lot of shared understanding there, and that comes from a collectivist um, mindset versus more individualistic in the Western society. So the rock there, in a lot of ways, it is similar in that it is about, the rock is the breadwinner and the provider of the family, and that part of the support system. Well, that's true from a more Southeastern Asian perspective. There's a stronger role to family that's tied to it. So both are breadwinners, or both are like, like the strong uh, male role model in both cultures, but the implications of if you're not are very different. So in a Western society, if you fail to meet that standard, then it's on yourself. That is, okay, I am a terrible person or something like that. That could, well, what the core belief could relate to. But from a more collective society, which this could be true for Southeast Asian, South Asian, um, it's more so I have failed the family. My role in this family has not been fulfilled, And that is the most important thing in some instances. So it's very important when you're engaging in a therapeutic context in that way to use language that supports ideas about the family versus the individual. Yeah. So that's a great question, Joseph, and something that you know, I don't necessarily have in mind at all times, but it's just at the back of my mind also. And it comes in as the conversation goes, just to, emphasize what their role in the family for sure. And another aspect about different cultures is that they all have different cultural norms. And so I use my own example that I have understanding. I have limited, but some understanding in other cultures, which I try to bring into the therapeutic conversation as well. So sometimes that means actually bringing in my own culture. Studies have shown that when it comes to broaching culture, bringing in your own as a therapist can help to bridge the gap of understanding as well. As long as you do the self-disclosure in an appropriate way, it can be very conducive for a stronger therapeutic alliance. But also, if I'm not aware of, so for example, Latin American cultures, they also hold similar, family values and other aspects to their culture when you bring it in, but it's not the same. So, broaching those subjects, bringing it out even without asking them, can be done in a respectful way, and it's often way more appropriate than just letting them bring it up first.
I think Alison have a question. When she is coming rock climbing with you, hanging high up there, how can she find that safe space in that uncomfortable space here, Alfred?
Mm, okay. Yeah. Um, so Allison, we should go rock climbing sometime and I can show you in person. Yeah. That could be an interesting case. But
Can I
see,
come too?
Yeah.
all right. So we're gonna have a rock climbing class starting in September.
Love
Um,
it.
so yeah, rock climbing is a good example because there's ways. So let's take the idea about exposure therapy. It's if someone is afraid to like have a conversation with somebody even, or like afraid of social situations, like going to parties, there's a step towards that, which is it could just be like talking to your neighbor and saying hi, and then working your way into going to more like higher pressure social setting. So with rock climbing, it also has those abilities to test the exposure. So you can start off indoors, you can start off at an easy climb, there's mats all around, and if you're actually climbing with ropes, there's harnesses, and there's a lot of safety aspects up to it. And so you can start off by just picking like just little steps at a time. It could be like, I've never rock climbed my entire life. It's okay. Let's go to this part of this wall where this is a level 0, which is the equivalent of a ladder. So if you can climb a ladder, then you can climb this rock face. And then yeah, it's just exposure can be a gold standard for many different things. So just adding that aspect to it. Then so the next is okay, let's go to the next level. Okay, next level. Then we're gonna go a little higher, then a little higher, then a little higher. So
There's
that's
a
the rock climbing aspect to it. Sorry, go ahead,
There's
Jeff.
another element in rock climbing that you haven't touched upon that I think is a really nice analogy to the therapeutic process, which is oftentimes you're dependent on the person holding your
Mm,
rope for you, right? So you have a
yeah,
belayer. So on top of kind of getting used to the activity, you're building up that kind of feeling of safety with the person who's literally holding your rope.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm sure that really can kind of really expand that therapeutic alliance, like
sure.
really kind of heighten that in
Yep.
that kind of a setting.
Yep. Yep. Unless you're Alex Honnold climbing El Capitan without any ropes,
Right,
you're gonna
yes.
need somebody.
That
I did
sounds
see that
terrifying.
documentary.
Yeah. That's
Takes a
that's for
long
sure.
time to get there, though.
Yeah.
We are very happy today to have Alfred here. We would love you to come back again next time. And thank you, Alfred, and thank you everybody for this podcast.